Hello, deep learners. I'm Andrew Ng, founder of DeepLearning.AI, and I'm excited to welcome you to our global deep learning community. I know that many of you are here today because you want to break into AI and build your career. I hope that being part of this community will help you to do so. To give you a proper welcome, I'd like to show you around the DeepLearning.AI offices and meet some of the teams so that you can see where it all happens.
Oh, hi, Andrew.
Do you want to tell our friends at Pine AI what you do at DeepLearning.AI?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I make articles and other media that help people learn about AI and help them understand the huge impact that AI is having in the world. Today, I'm putting together the next issue of The Batch, our weekly newsletter, and I'm looking for the biggest stories of the week to keep our readers informed.
What's been the most surprising thing you've run into working on The Batch?
How much is going on in this field? There's never a dull moment. You might think from the outside that machine learning engineers really understand everything about AI, but nobody understands everything about AI because this field is just coming to life right before my eyes as I put this thing together every week.
All right, I know you're really busy, so I'll let you get back to it.
Thanks. See you later.
Let's go meet Kian, who helped me create the deep learning specialization. He's working on an exciting new project. Hey Kian, so do you want to tell the people at Pine AI what you're working on?
Yes, sure. I'm leading a project called Morey, focusing on helping people get offers in AI and navigating their career by testing their skills, preparing for interviews and certifying them, as well as matching and referring them to good jobs in AI.
That's really cool. And what's the most exciting part of your day?
You know, the AI field is new, organizations and jobs are still misunderstood. So I'm excited to help people understand what different types of jobs exist in the field, what tasks they will work on, and what skills are needed to achieve those tasks.
That's really important work. Well, it's nice chatting. And now let's go chat with Mortel, who is on their product team.
Hey, Andrew.
Do you want to say hi to our friends at Pine AI and let them know what you're working on?
I would love to. Hi, everyone. I lead the product team in DeepLearning.AI, where we create AI education content accessible to people all around the world. People like you.
And what are you most excited about right now?
I am so excited to see our community grow and to see how eager people are to learn more about AI.
Thanks, also.
Thanks, Andrew.
So, as you can see, our team is working hard to support you and help you learn. It's never been easier than before to break into AI. So if you want to build a career, you can leverage online resources available, including open source code, datasets, papers, and online courses like a deep learning specialization on Coursera. As part of this journey, I hope you get your hands dirty too. Don't be afraid of diving in to build your own project, or go ahead and try to replicate a research paper that you're excited about. One thing that I've seen help a lot of people succeed is if you can build a community or find a community of fellow deep learners you can meet with and study with on a regular basis. In fact, I hope that this Pine AI meetup that you're at right now will be a good place for you to meet these people. I hope you enjoyed the event today and that you learn a lot, both from the talks and from each other. And once again, welcome to the DeepLearning.AI community.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us again today. Thank you to Andrew Dang and DeepLearning.AI for sponsoring this event. Today we have a special treat for you. We're going to be speaking about conflict zones, how AI and other emerging technologies could potentially help mitigate the issues in conflict zones. I don't know how many of you out there know, but really many millions of people get affected by this every year. According to the UN, nearly 80 million people, or almost 1% of the entire population of the world, gets affected and displaced by things like conflicts between peoples. This is something that affects so many people. We've been living with conflicts amongst each other, amongst humans for generations, for decades, for millennia. And this affects even up to, they say, 40% of those 80 million are children. So the weakest amongst us have to forcibly leave where they live because of issues between politics, between socioeconomic differences, and so many other things that tend to divide humanity as a whole. But why does it have to be that way? With so many riches in the world, why are there a subset of our own humans, our own brothers and sisters from around the world that get affected by these things? There's so much to go around. What if we could use these technologies that are coming from artificial intelligence to be able to solve those kinds of problems? That's what we're going to be discussing today. I hope you enjoy this conversation. I'd like to introduce my co-host extraordinaire, Mr. Fritz Brazos. He is here tonight, and he's going to be introducing our speaker, and then he and I and our speaker this evening will be answering some questions for you, and we'll be going back and discussing this topic. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy.
Thank you so much, Jose. I have the pleasure of introducing Farzana Yaqoob tonight. Farzana Yaqoob is the next generation of leadership in South Asia. She is a youth leader, social activist, entrepreneur who believes in humanity and striving for justice. Yaqoob is a former minister for social welfare and women development in Azad Jammu and Kashmir. She developed the office by integrating a citizen-centric model, incorporating access for women as one of the core values for departmental procedures. During her tenure, she worked closely with all political parties, representatives of civil society, government officials, and the media, bridging the urban-rural gaps. She was part of the government task force responsible for starting 5 universities and 3 medical colleges in Kashmir. Yaqoob is the first female Kashmiri parliamentarian to have spoken on the conflict in Kashmir at the foreign ministers meeting of OIC in New York. Yaqoob is an Eisenhower Fellow 2016. Her focus during the fellowship was on conflict resolution and climate change mitigation strategies. I could probably go on for an hour just talking about all the amazing things she's done, but we should probably just listen to her talk. Everyone, Farzana Yaqoob.
Thank you so much, Fritz and Jose, for having this discussion, because whenever we speak about technology, mostly what people are thinking of is the technical gadgets that they're using, and only the beneficial side of tech is what the masses are thinking of and considering, and that's the excitement that people have when it comes to technology, that there will be and there is an improvement in the life and lifestyles, and the hope and expectation that as technology improves, so will the life of human beings. But then, there's always the other side, the dark side, which is the impact of technology on conflict zones. I myself am from Kashmir, which is a very long-standing issue. It's a geographical conflict. It is a political conflict. It's as old as the Palestinian issue. So how has technology impacted these long-standing conflict zones? And also, how has technology influenced, or has it increased the conflict? Yes, very much so. In this day and age, the impact of technology on the conflict is very severe and very serious. There are some benefits, and then there are quite serious implications. For example, before social media platforms were available, it was really difficult to get news out of conflict zones. And hardly people had mobiles, and so we depended heavily on journalists who were in those war zones and conflict zones, on the information gathering and then sharing. And so one could not really check, what kind of information was being shared. Was it fake information? The very much in and in vogue word, the lies that can be shared with complete like blatantness, and the fact that it doesn't really matter what the truth is, the repetitive lying that has happened. So this medium just grew larger because now people don't really have to rely on the historical media outlets, print media, electronic media. Literally in conflict zones, anyone who has a mobile and has some rudimentary knowledge of how to make a video can become and does become a journalist, or at least a person who's sharing information. They're taking up live videos. What that has done has it has created a huge resource pool of information, of um, content that needs to be deciphered and understood. And that is where I see the artificial intelligence playing a very important role, because the content that is being uploaded from conflict areas, it could be, when it is real content and not doctored, it is evidence of the atrocities that are taking place. And also the fact that improved artificial intelligence could help us in, and it already is, to find whether the news is fake or not. The videos or whatever the information is coming, is it true or not, or is it an agenda based information that is coming out. Also, before this strong influence of technology, killing people was a difficult job. Human beings had to do it personally. Technology has now facilitated that as well. You can just weaponize a drone. You don't even have to see what you're doing. And this impersonalization of abuse has increased abuse. The impact that killing or seeing blood, or when a crime is being perpetrated, it has a psychological effect on the perpetrator as well. The criminal is also affected by what he or she is doing, especially as Jose mentioned, that it's women and children who are impacted and affected. So, if you are unable to really see what you have done, and if you don't hear the screams, the cries, the destruction, when you're physically far away from that event, it makes you a lot more cold in your actions. And the expectation that you would um, be you would come around to not inflicting pain, because you can actually feel the pain that you're inflicting. When you're distanced from that event, you don't feel that, and so you could go on a killing spree. And we've seen the destruction that drones cause, and people who are operating those zones could be anywhere, because the drones are literally using the kind of technologies that one would be using for in their mobiles. And it is so it's like very blatant. So the the impact is very much enhanced, and that's the problem, that it's always been like that, that whatever innovation, because we're looking at good medicines coming in, health improving, but also the negative side of technology tends to grow faster. And that could be an impression and an experience, because I am from a conflict zone, that we feel that the weaponization of anything that comes out, which is expected to be mostly helping people, ends up actually not helping them but causing more problems. And that in itself makes it very dangerous. It's technology or anything is a tool, and how it is used depends on the users. And so weaponization of these tools is extremely dangerous, and it is very much happening. But the good side is that we can also use this to mitigate or resolve conflicts. For example, with the kind of the way AI is growing, and I see the artificial intelligence and deep learning as seeds that are being planted by human beings, and then they have their own life, and it just grows, and you're not really sure what it'll become, but you see it growing. What is important is that what has gone into that seed, the information. And so at this point of time, conflict zones or people who are living in conflict zones, their impact or their input in technology is hardly minimal. What that does is that mostly the decision makers are sort of far away from the actual conflict zones, and for them to have the real feel of what is going on and what decisions would impact how, the what and the how, it becomes a little difficult. Why? Because the decision making is not inclusive. People, the conflict zone habitants are not involved in mitigation and resolution. And so to have that kind of information or that input, or for the decision makers to take that, to make that effort to be very inclusive when they're making these seeds, the programmings that are being done. How many Kashmiris could be there, how many Palestinians there would be, but it would not be a significant number that could have a positive impact on the understanding of the situation. Because you see, mostly we have very impersonal understanding of conflicts because we don't know people personally. And since we don't know them personally, so that personal understanding, or that understanding of grief or pain, that is not really there. And so the cultural context is not there, the historical context is of course there, but reading a book and collecting facts and data and figure is very important, of course, but the impact that the humans have is very different. And so to have such people on board is extremely important. So being inclusive is very important. Now, how do you add those people who might, for example, in Kashmir we have regular internet blackout, people who are sharing their dissent on social media platforms, their pages are blocked, and then they could have they have cases filed against them, they're apprehended. And so in the past few years we've seen that social media has actually for everyone it is this free space where you have freedom of expression. But for conflict areas, it is not a free space because the rules and regulations are such that different. I would not name the names of the social media platforms, but the way they go after you and they block your account. If you have a set of people that is complaining against you, now this set of people could be from the other side of the conflict. There's always two sides to the conflict. So one side when is sharing information, and the other side people, maybe hundreds of people start complaining that, oh, this is hurting our feelings and this and that. And so what we've seen is that those pages are blocked, and what that does is that the information is then unable to be shared. And so we need to see how we can make these platforms more inclusive, have more women, of course. It is, because men bring, I always say this, men bring quantity, women bring in the quality. So instead of increasing the numbers, now whatever we have needs to be enhanced, it needs to be improved. And that is where the inclusivity of everything comes in. So and the people who live in conflict zones, they need to be empathized with, they need to be understood. And all the content that is being generated, AI is an exceptional technology that can go through all that data and then to identify patterns. What kind of, for example, if we were to see media, or for example, how is Kashmir seen or presented in the world? It would be very interesting to see, how media has presented the issue of Kashmir or Palestine, or the recently Nagorno-Karabakh. We see, we're not really sure who the enemy is in Azerbaijan and Armenian conflict. Every side feels that it is their right to take part in this conflict because of their cultural, historical, political differences. Kashmir, once again, is so crucial and important because it sits right in the center of three nuclear powers: Pakistan, China, and India. And so, if we don't put in the effort of understanding these conflict hotbeds or hot zones, this could lead to a very different kind of war. And mind it that, since World War II, we have not had wars where millions of people have died. But what we have had is displacements. Millions of people have been displaced, so the death might have decreased, but the pain and the problems and the way life is affected has been significant. So all, like, be it Syria and the different African countries that face conflicts regularly, post-colonial era has been very, very full of conflicts. So these displacements are extremely painful, and they themselves then lead to conflicts as well. We saw that, like, we regularly see the news of refugees trying to enter into European countries, and then their boats sinking, and huge number of people dying, and there is no place that these people who have nowhere to go, the displaced people are unknown, unheard, unseen people. Very few make it to the news, but a huge number is unknown, and they die in miserable states. And so what this technology could do is that, I as a human being cannot go through all the information, but AI can, and then it can highlight. It also then brings in the problem of silos, the information. We've been seeing, and this has affected elections, and America has had its elections, and we've seen how the previous and current elections were influenced by just how information was being presented to each one of the voters. And so it makes this weaponization of these tools is extremely dangerous because it influences your decision making faculties. You could have the same set of information that a few people have, but the presentation, just the fact that it has been doctored with, it's been changed, could lead to different decisions. And so, although we feel that the decision is informed, but it could actually be misinformed. So I would stop here, and thank you so much. We can now, any questions? I mean, this is such a huge topic. We could go on for hours and still, like, really not be able to completely understand or discuss how technology influences and how we can use it to mitigate conflicts.
Yeah, thank you so much, Farzana. That was awesome. I know we have some questions coming in from the comments. Can we get the first one up? Awesome. So John Taylor wanted to ask a little bit about how AI can be used to bridge gaps in language, cultural differences, and I assume really specifically about conflicts, people with very different opinions about what's happening.
So once again, this is where the decision making being misinformed or ill-informed comes in. Language is extremely important, but what really makes it understandable is the context of the words, why, what was said, and how the technology side helps is that, the sheer size of data that is being generated, and in all different languages. And here we go back to the fact of inclusivity, like, so for example, I speak Urdu language, and there is so much of content that is being generated in regional languages, especially when it comes to conflicts. You will seldom. It's like not just the usual uh, English language, but there are so many regional languages. Now, how do you decipher? Technology could help, but then that all depends on the seed that is being generated. What information has gone into generating that seed, which is then going to grow. If we have put in the correct information in designing the AI tool, the expectation is that the results or the understanding that is developed by those tools would be very much what we expect: neutrality and objectivity, which for human beings can be very difficult, because you're psychologically designed to have emotions, and so your decision making is impacted. And that is why when we get emotional or very associated or attached to conflicts, the decision making might not be as it is expected. We might be taking side of or making decisions that could be not just or fair. The expectation is that technology could help us in that because of lack of emotions, but we have yet to see, because we're seeing these platforms and technology grow in such an amazing way that, like, it's and the pace at which everything is changing, it's like, you have to literally re-educate yourself every year. You become an uneducated person if you're not going to be reading about the advancements. So yes, I would always leave it at a positive note that yes, I hope that the designers, people like you and Jose and Fritz and all those people who are at the forefront of making and designing these technologies, that you would be thinking about how inclusive it is and how it will impact people, uh, those people who cannot reach out to you and who might not be able to connect to you, how to bring them on board and how to make platforms that can actually maybe understand the situations and not use it the other way, and not weaponize it, that as we have seen in social media, it is extremely and highly weaponized, and it is extremely dangerous. Um, in the early 20th century, the maximum damage was you dying, but now you live, but with a thought process that is extremely dangerous, that is more dangerous than you killing, influencing the decisions of masses of people. Each one of us is an extremely powerful person, but not really educated or well informed enough to be responsible for what we're sharing with these masses of people. So, human beings and technology have to work together to remove all these glitches. I mean, that's the maximum I would like to say. Not a very strong negative word, but the issues are very much there. Uh, the problems are increasing, but so is the impact. The positive side is also there. So there's always this good and bad cop happening all the time. So I just hope the good cop is at it and on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems, Farzana, thank you so much. And for everyone that's in the audience, we have to give a very special thanks to Farzana, because right now it is like 5 a.m. I'm sorry if you hear my dog in the background. He's actually having a dream right now. So he's probably chasing his buddy, the cat. Anyways, but Farzana, it is 5 a.m. over there in Islamabad. So thank you so much for getting up really early, although it's evening for us here on the East Coast, and then our West Coast people watching, it's early afternoon or early evening, or late afternoon, early evening. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. And go, stop it. Wake up. Sorry. And as far as you mentioned our recent elections. None of us have really been paying attention to the elections, but it's funny you bring it up. But no, AI obviously has played a huge role. I think people are very famous with Cambridge Analytica. Analyzing down to the very few words. Previous elections, it became very famous, and obviously a lot of that's been going on and even going on before the advent of some of our more advanced artificial intelligence applications that we use now. There's evidence of that going all the way back into the 60s, evaluating data down to the granular level of words and the intonation of words, how people respond to that. So, and you mentioned the humanity, and I'd love to get your thoughts. And there's a ton of questions we're gonna get to. And thank you everyone that's on. And please keep asking questions as things come up. Keep asking more. We'll get to all of them, or as many as we can within the hour. But you talk about, Farzana, the artificial intelligence and at the beginning, trying to bring the humanity back into AI and making sure that we try to code humanity into it. And I would agree with you, but the question I have is, we see how, humanity even itself is sometimes humans can do some of the most amazing and most beautiful things, right? We have done some horrendous things to ourselves for ridiculous reasons of differences between all sorts of things. Like, you like a different color, or you have a different flag, or you like a different taste of peanut butter. Like, it's whatever. It's just such ridiculousness that we tend to divide each other. So putting humanity into AI, bringing back into it, I wonder, is that really, is that going to be the solution? Because humanity in and of itself can be just as bad to other humans as anything else. And AI and other emerging technologies, they're tools, and tools can be used for good, tools can be used for bad. So that's something that I'm conflicted about. Is it do we need more humanity, or do we need less humanity?
So that's where we go back to being inclusive. Why we need more humanity is that when I am speaking about human influence, I'm just talking about the positive side and the right side, because technology is also weaponized and extremely dangerous. Now, how a tool, and human beings are also tools. Human beings are influenced. They can be used. They can be abused, and it's the same with technology. And that is why we need the people who are designing these programs, who are working in these fields. They need to have empathy to understand the impact of their technology. As I mentioned, drones, and I think there is a question of drones as well.
There are a lot of questions. That's perfect. Talk about drones, because we have so many questions about drones.
I know, yeah. Like, I couldn't go read the whole question, but I was drones.
Yeah. No, that's great. So
we use drones for agricultural purposes as well. That's the good side.
Yeah.
There are so many other positive and good uses of drones, but then drones are used to kill as well. And the precision. Now, here is technology. The precision of being able to kill has improved many folds.
Right.
And now you seldom make mistake. You actually kill. Now, that's the kind of implications of the applications or the technology that is being designed. And this is by design. I mean, there's this conscious decision that this is how we will be killing the next time. This is the future of killing. What is conflict? It is all about, killing or making decision about people that don't want to be with another set of people, but we insist that no, these two sets of different groups of people who have different thought processes and everything, they must live together, because this is a geographical territory, nation states, and all that la la la, and so they must live together. But how has technology improved conflicts? And that, I mean, in a very negative sense. The precision of killing, the precision of hurting, the precision of gagging, it is extremely dangerous. As I told you, that in Kashmir we have internet blackouts. Now it is so easy, as easy it is for anyone to reach out to the whole world. At the same the other side, when you flip the coin, it is extremely easy to shut you out of the world as well. Yeah. That is technology.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned regarding the drone technology and regarding AI being so pinpoint, and you talked about how now we have less death because of these kind of precision types of weaponry, but we actually have more displacement. And I mentioned the numbers at the beginning of 80 million people as of last year, 2019, that were displaced. And the major countries that tend to take these displaced peoples are regional countries. Pakistan is one of the top 5, Germany, Turkey, Colombia, or are some of the other major countries that have millions of displaced peoples. What is your view for artificial intelligence to help logistically with managing that large numbers of people, which that's the ramifications of having these precision weaponry, right? So now we have, like you said, people don't die, but people are leaving, and they're being forced to go to places they don't want to go, leave their homes,
Yes.
being forced to go to these other countries. How can AI help improve the logistical aspects of managing these displaced peoples in these countries that are not their homelands?
I think, when we're talking about displaced people, if we keep it regional, then there is more conflict. The decisions have to be more at a global level. And this is where United Nations can play an extremely significant role. And it does use technology, especially when it comes to AI. I was reading one of the research papers, and they are implementing some technology based applications where they go through this a lot of data, because even when you're sitting across the table to resolve a conflict, you need to have a lot of facts at your fingertips, or to understand the conflicts, because these are long standing conflicts, and you can't start without having the complete knowledge of these conflicts. And also, um, mostly the countries that take in refugees, internally displaced, it's just not people crossing borders and going into another country. Even within a country, the internal displacement is also severe. uh, they're developing countries, the resource constraint, just the fact that civil society and NGOs, they could improve their performance by being helped by these technologies, where what is needed. And because I'm just talking of the first hand experience we had in 2005. We had a massive earthquake which literally decimated Kashmir, like a whole city was literally like, it just came down. What we saw was that there was too much of some things and there was zero of other things. People sent a lot of clothes, but then it took some time to bring in the medicine. So this design planning, because human beings, as I said, are emotionally involved, when you see death and destruction. Now if there are these technological tools that can help you in that planning, and logistics is extremely important, where what is needed, 1 2 3, because there's always priority when it comes to disaster risk management. So while people are rushing, human beings are rushing. And so there can the use of technology, because no emotional attachment, so that objectivity, that neutrality can really help, one, in saving resources, which is so important. What we see mostly is that lack of resources, because these are developing countries which are hosting millions of refugees. And also, you know for example, the reaction that European countries have to refugees coming in is very strong. Now for these countries to be able to understand, or maybe come out like, so we have this much of resources that we can set aside for refugees, this is the number that we can afford to keep in these places. This requires a lot of decision making, but well informed. It has to be very precise and well informed, because if it is not, then people react, they come out, and that enhances, that makes racism greater. So conflicts of different nature come up again and again. One conflict which is very far away from you, and you might think that it is not going to affect you, will influence you. You will be surprised how a far off conflict could really uh, hurt you and influence you. And France is a recent example of how a faraway issue can really, um, work in someone's mind and then make them go on a killing spree. So human minds work, and so technology was very much part, because these people were being influenced to take part in these criminal activities, to perpetrate these crimes. They've been influenced by the information that they have received through technology.
Yeah.
They literally get brainwashed. This repetitiveness of technology.
I think that's perfect. Fritz, I think that leads good into the next question.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the influence, and you were talking about how people get desensitized and things, and how do you think that like social media affects conflict zones in the sense of like desensitizing people versus like the ability that it could be to really personalize these conflicts for people all around in a good way or in a negative way? I mean, I think you're right. It really does. It's like a double-edged sword. It absolutely can be really great, really, really terrible.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And so, like you can't take, so the responsibility is not with the technology. It's simple as that. The responsibility of is on the use of that technology, and it is so easy to weaponize technology. um, for example, any information, and you guys would know this better than me, you can find any kind of information that you need for weaponizing anything on any of the search engines that are used by people. Now that kind of information was not like an easy set of information before we had all these information and tools for sharing information, and then for other people having access. So the question that the access to information has been eased extensively, but the use of that information, that is now the decision that uh, technology masters, I call them masters, because the influence of even one of the platforms is huge. Billions of people, it's not even billions. How and what you do, you're actually, those platforms are responsible. You will have to take responsibility, because these actions can directly be related to how the information was presented, how many times it was repeated, and then what the outcome was. So everyone has to be extremely responsible. And also the legal system, the judicial system has to be refined. What we're seeing is that technology is growing at such a fast pace that all the other administrative and governance systems are unable to catch on. By the time they're like, okay, we'll legislate for AI in health, this is how much you can do and this is how much you can't do. By the time the legislation is finalized, it takes a few years. The technology has gone like leaps and bounds ahead. So we're so slow in all other matters because we're very much on a human speed, while the machine speed is significant and it's moving faster. So those legal frameworks that make people human and humane, those are also required for technology. Abuse, misuse, and then to hold people accountable for doing wrong actions.
Yes. Okay. So we have a question from Lydia Cleveland. Thank you for this great session. Can you speak a little bit about the unintentional bias of AI, especially against women and people of color, and ways in which this can mitigate in conflict settings?
Yes. So I've been repeatedly saying that I see artificial intelligence and deep learning as seeds. The content that goes into making that seed, designing that seed, is extremely, extremely important. But the designers, how much are they aware of the importance of that seed and what it will grow into? Because no one knows what it grows into. These are uncharted, the twilight zone that you're in. We don't really know what it will become, how it will become. And so inclusivity, these design teams need to be extremely inclusive, and that is where they can play an extremely crucial role when it comes to conflicts. Having people off the conflict, at least having some connection or some information about them. But your personal connection could be difficult, but to be able to access those regions and to have these the understanding of the people. How do people within the conflict zones understand their problems, and how the world understands their problem is worlds apart. We need to bridge that gap of understanding by providing the required language, because even the vocabulary is different, the understanding is different. So we need to bridge the gap of communication, to at least to come to a bare minimum level of a level playing field, where what is being said is actually understood in its true context, and not understood or misunderstood, which leads to misunderstanding and then more conflicts.
Farzana, a next question by Abby Flower, and I'll add to this one as well. Abby wants to know, with technology, AI being integrated into governments more and more, what's your opinion? Do you think this would lead to more chaos or less war or more war? And I'll add subsequent to that, you mentioned earlier, not knowing who the enemy is in places like in different regions, especially now that kind of conflicts can be a little bit more nebulous with the way that nefarious actors tend to kind of initiate them. Do we see at any point with, thinking about Abby's question, do we see at any point AI being the one who decides which sides are right, which sides are wrong, completely independently of itself? Do you ever see a future where that occurs?
Well, as per the fiction movies, that is the future. As per the technology people, that is the future. As per the people who are not in experts of this field, that is not an acceptable future. Because sometimes there is a difference between right and just. For example, if someone has stolen something, the right decision was to punish them. But the just decision would be to understand why did that person steal, and then to help that person out of that situation so that they don't steal. These are two different ways of actually solving problems, and it all goes back, and so this the communication gap that I spoke of. Now, the people who are designing these technologies, they're not decision makers, and so they don't know that how this impacts the decisions. And so there has to be this bridging of gaps. There is such distancing of people, of expertise. People are actually now living in very strong silos, and they end up spending all their lives in it. So, for example, in conflict resolution, when two countries are discussing, for example, Afghanistan, discussions are taking place in Doha, and so there was Afghanistan, representatives of Afghanistan, there were representatives of America, but how many technology experts were there for them to be part of these discussions, so that they become well informed enough to be able to design tools that could help them? The work is going on. I'm not saying that it's not really there, but just this understanding that the inclusivity that we require is not really there. You can't have all experts at the same place at the same time. Mostly this work is done by the defense sector, helped by the private sector, but this becomes a very much a government forte when it comes to conflicts, because the emanation, the information that is required is mostly not public information. Now, here's another issue. You see, the decisions when it comes to conflict zones are based on information that is not public. America is a good example. I'm not really sure, but after 20 or 30 years, the documents can be made public. Until that time,
depends on the level of secrecy.
Information. And imagine that 2 to 3 decades. I mean, that's when it comes to the pace of technology. It's completely old era when the information comes into the public domain after 2-3 decades. So it literally becomes useless. So like, so there are so many different perspectives to the same issue. And, you can't expect prime ministers to be AI experts. You can't expect them to understand. So using plain language, making these tools extremely efficient and really smart, but then at the same time, the challenge is understandable. It's not the machine, not just the machine that needs to understand it, but we, the lay people, also need to understand it. So there's always this huge communication gap, this understanding gap, uh, which sometimes actually decreases the benefits, uh, because you're not have getting the full use, and so you stay, you don't get to enjoy it completely.
It's funny, as advanced as technology gets, we always go back to really low tech things as really the basis of the solution. Really, communication, bringing people to the table, understanding each other, being open to differences, talking. Um, I give talks on cybersecurity, and I usually tell people like the most advanced thing you have, or the best tool you have, is actually your people. It's not like this new fancy gadget or application. It's your people. Because it really comes down to behavioral science. If you get the people to understand how people are trying to implement these types of things to infiltrate your enterprise, then you will be able to block it with your people more so than paying for anything, any fancy piece of equipment you can get. Anyways, we're coming up to the hour, so we're gonna try to get to as many, maybe 2 or 3 more questions, and then Farzana will let you go, and bless you and thank you so much for the time you're spending with us. So Fritz, you want to ask this next question?
Absolutely. This one is from Joe Jackson. Is AI prone to hacking in the battlefield? What about Stockholm Syndrome when dealing with the enemy? Is it possible for our system to be turned against us?
Of course, any system can be used against you. This is a two-way weapon. It's not like any weapon, even guns that you use for shooting others, can be used on you. They might not be used by yourself on yourself, but by someone else on you. So the power that technology gives to criminals to be able to abuse, misuse, is so huge that it is very scary. And for people who have not experienced it, they might not understand a very significant but comparatively a small example. Um, the harassment and of children, uh, that that can be done online, and these are young minds, and they can't decide who is approaching them with what intent. And this distancing, the same issue with the drones, that the distance makes you more cruel. And these same issues that are now an everyday issue, it is almost and sadly in every place it is there. The abuse that children are receiving on these on these social uh, media platforms, the peer pressure to look in one particular way.
Yeah.
And so the inclusivity, I mean, the whole world is on these social media platforms, but this inclusivity is not leading to acceptability of different colors, different people, different looks. It starts with a huge number of different ideas and opinions, but it always then starts to synthesize. It starts to come around to few clusters of ideas and opinions, and then people stick to them because that is what they can associate with. And so this impression that all ideas or all opinions carry weight, no, they don't. Sadly, they don't. It we're social animals. We live in groups, and we think in groups as well. So even if I have a difference of opinion, so if I feel that I won't be acceptable in the group, I will not express that opinion. Then with time I will change, and I will become just like the group. And that is what human beings crave, to be part of something.
Yeah.
And that is where so many issues can come up. So yes, be very careful. Like, you can go online and see all the scary documentaries you want to see of how you can be abused. how these tools can be taken away from you very easily. It's not an issue.
Yeah, I think I think it might be an old Chinese adage that talks about how your greatest weapon can be used against you. Your greatest weapon is oftentimes your greatest weakness. So, as we develop these more advanced systems, I think they can absolutely be used against us at some point. I think something else we have to worry about. In regards to the Stockholm syndrome, Joe, if you're asking if we can utilize it to maybe help people with Stockholm syndrome, there is a lot of AI applications out there for helping people with PTSD and with other kind of mental health disorders around depression, anxiety. So I totally see the ability to be able to use that in combination with things like augmented reality and virtual reality as well, like machine learning and AI to help those. If the question was, could AI be used to exacerbate Stockholm syndrome?
Yes.
I don't even want to consider that, but like obviously yes, but not something I want to spend the last 4 minutes discussing. Let's see. Maybe we can ask one more question, and then we'll close. You got one up, Bertie. So this one from Spencer Baldwin. So I guess this goes a little bit along the lines of some of the other questions we had, but I guess that maybe the crux of this one is could we see AI being used to be able to reduce biases? I guess, especially with some of the systemic inequalities that might be in certain laws in certain countries. Could we see AI hopefully being able to reduce our own biases that humans kind of instill into things over time?
Yes, of course, the biases can be decreased, but once again, it all depends on the design of that program, whose mind was behind it. You know, all those designers, you then need to understand, you know, are they really designed with zero bias? If the design has zero bias, then if of course it will decrease bias, but that is mostly impossible. You know, we are not trained, we are not educated in the initial formational years to remove our biases. Bias education to you know, to understand what bias is and what it does to you, it comes in higher education or maybe at a master's level. Not everyone goes to that level. You know, when we mostly see in technology firms that, you know, your degree is not important.
Yeah.
If you have the skill set, it's fine. So that means that if that person who is in the design team or the design team, if none of them has done PhD, if none of them has received even in one of their courses what bias is, how to identify it, and then how to rectify it or remove it, and then how do you expect them not to have that bias in that design?
Yeah.
So this is design thinking which needs to be improved. And so I go back, the seed really needs a lot of work.
If you were going to tell people to take one course to try to help improve that self-realization, would it be a philosophy course? Would it be a religion course, a humanities course? What would you tell people to study?
You know, each of these is not acceptable to a big group of people. So once you can't enforce your own ideas. Like, you know, for example, if I say that philosophy, that's me forcing, like, you know, or ethics. I think basic knowledge of ethics and empathy and bias, you know, put that into one package.
Yeah.
And I mean, even children should at least have some knowledge of bias, at least.
Right.
Like, you know, it's very rudimentary knowledge, but at least to identify that, oh, so I'm biased at this point of time. If I'm not this particular shade and that person is a different shade, and if I'm not liking that, well, there's a bias. There's something wrong in the design that is being put into my head, that I'm being fed the information that is then making it grow bigger. So it's all about the design. The design thinking needs to be improved. The more work, the more information, the more understanding of human nature and our fallacies by the designers of technology, the better the technology. But then the more lethal, it's dangerous as well. The more you understand human brain, the more you can influence it.
Well, Farzana, this has been phenomenal. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. we're finishing up. So thank you for this time. Fritz, any last thoughts from you? What have you taken away from this phenomenal hour with Farzana tonight?
I think just the metaphor of a seed and how kind of what you put into it and how kind of like the biases and things that you bring to it just get really amplified through the use of technology. I thought that was like a really solid point and something that's like a good takeaway.
Farzana, any last closing thoughts?
Thank you so much, Jose and Fritz and the team for having me for this episode. And I hope that people learned and understood. And I'm going to give a very simple example of how technology can fit with a very rudimentary technology, which is electricity. Forget your phones and AI, and this is like, very advanced technology. If any one US city is without electricity for a week, we're going to die. Okay, that's how dependent we are on this basic technologies. So advanced technologies is the next level, and their influence is very different.
Yeah.
So I leave you with the words that be careful and be a human being. Remember that anything and everything that you do or you say, your hand and your tongue influences, and it can hurt. And when you remember these two very basic and rudimentary principles, that you have the power to hurt, and please don't hurt, you will be a different person. So remember not to hurt. And this is from me. I come from a conflict zone. I see the death and the pain, and one cannot understand it until and unless you don't experience it. I leave you with very simple message. Remember not to hurt. Please remember that you're human beings. You're not a machine. Don't be a machine. Let the machines be machines. You be the human. You be the softer side.
Well, thank you for that. And I will leave it with that. Everyone, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time for joining us this evening. I hope this has been edifying to you, and we will try to answer your questions that we didn't get to later on via the chat on YouTube. And please stay tuned for our next episode. And remember, as Farzana said, try not to hurt. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.